Breaking. AU's alleged One United Army Command under One Africa government. A dream finally taking shape. By Takunda Mabika, Southern Africa Breaking News. Tisu Vanhuvacho. And today, Tiri Kutanga Chimwe Chinhu Chakanyanya. We're giving Africa its heartbeat back. The day Africa decided to defend itself, together. Brothers and sisters, we're not just watching history, we're writing it. According to deep intel leaked to SABN, Africa is allegedly on the verge of activating a continental military command under the visionary One Africa government model. Yes, an African army under African control, protecting African lives. And this is not a future dream anymore. It's already happening. We've spent centuries being divided by maps we didn't draw, and now we are uniting by values we define ourselves, says Chairman Shadow, our trusted AU insider.
Okay, imagine this. A single, unified African military, a continental army. Is that just, a far-off dream, or could it actually be taking shape right now? Today, we're doing a deep dive into some really fascinating, honestly, pretty startling intelligence. It suggests Africa might be, on the verge of activating a continental military command, part of this One Africa government idea. And the source we're looking at claims this isn't just some future plan, it's supposedly already happening.
Yeah, the source material is described as deep intel leaked to Southern Africa Breaking News. It's a YouTube source detailing accounts from what it calls trusted AU insiders and even embedded tech operators. So our mission here is to really unpack the details of this alleged blueprint, try to understand the vision behind it, which is incredibly ambitious, and look at the reactions both within Africa and, globally.
And the big question hovering over all this is, how could a unified African army, genuinely under African control, focused on protecting African lives, how could that fundamentally reshape the continent and its place in the world? Okay, let's unpack this. What really grabbed me right away is where this whole thing supposedly started. The sources claim it kicked off with a secret meeting. Yesterday, they say, in Pretoria. Yeah. Not on any public calendar, no media invited, just apparently 12 of Africa's most powerful military figures from all over the continent gathered during an AU security ministers meeting, but off the book.
Exactly. And the source cites someone they call Protocol Black, an embedded tech operator. This person apparently noted the meeting was listed, almost deceptively, as a strategic continental consultation. But the confidential files supposedly revealed the real deal, the Pan-African Security Integration Blueprint 2025 to 2045. And the goal, to create something Africa's never really had. One army, one mission,
one command. That's quite a statement.
It really is, and it raises this fundamental question, What does it actually mean for a continent to define its own defense, its own security, after centuries of, external influence dictating things? It feels like a move towards real self-determination.
So this isn't just talk. The source claims there is a precise plan, a military architecture designed with precision, love, and continental pride. That's quite the description. Let's walk through this proposed structure. What does this One Africa Army actually look like on paper?
It's surprisingly detailed. Okay, first up, they propose a Continental Defense Leadership Council, the CDLC. This would apparently have 5 rotating generals, one from each of Africa's 5 regions, plus, importantly, 1 civilian oversight head who'd be elected by the AU Parliament, and 2 chiefs focusing on strategy and
so a mix of military and civilian leadership right at the top.
Precisely, and their mission is stated as plan, deploy, and decide together. Critically, every single mission would need Pan-African
approval. That sounds good for unity, but does it also risk slowing things down in a crisis? How do they balance that consensus with the need for, rapid response sometimes?
That's the inherent tension, isn't it? The source suggests it's a deliberate choice, prioritizing political buy-in and making sure all regions feel represented, maybe even over sheer speed. The idea seems to be building trust and legitimacy from the start, avoiding the pitfalls of, say, 1 or 2 powerful nations dominating everything. It's about long-term stability.
Okay, what else is in the blueprint?
Right, then you have the 5 continental regional commands, the CRCs. These are described as the shields of the continent. And they even list specific locations: North Command in Cairo, West in Accra, Central in Kinshasa, East in Nairobi, and Southern
So
Command right there in
decentralized
Pretoria.
operational hubs.
Exactly. Each one responsible for training, mobilizing troops, and responding to pretty much everything in their region, from, say, disaster relief like floods to counterterrorism operations. Localized response, but under that unified continental umbrella. The blueprint also includes Pan-African elite units. These are specialized forces designed for very specific threats. For instance, they mention desert lions for operations in the Sahel. Think, specialized counterinsurgency tactics suited for that unique
Not just
desert
generic special
environment.
forces then.
No, very tailored. Then there are forest rangers for guerrilla warfare, but also urban response with a focus noted on de-escalation, and maritime guardians for tackling piracy and protecting the oceans. The names themselves suggest a focus on Africa's
That level of
specific challenges.
specialization is, quite impressive. It shows a deep understanding of the varied threats across the continent.
It seems so. And moving on, they're definitely acknowledging the new battleground, cyber and space. There's a dedicated cyber and space division. This part talks about digital labs and software development in Nairobi, leveraging Kenya's tech hub status, presumably. AI and robotics research based in Tunis. Satellite operations out of Algiers. And drone command coordinated from
so
Addis
a truly
Ababa.
modern, tech-focused approach, distributed across the continent too.
Yes, it seems designed to leverage existing strength. It's all meant to be coordinated for interagency tech sharing. Then there's education, a whole military academy network. The goal here is to raise future leaders with continental exposure. They list specific academies: Kigali and Lusaka, focusing on intel and surveillance; Abuja for engineering; Addis Ababa for doctrine and
Continental
international
exposure.
law.
How do they ensure that?
Well, the blueprint apparently states that each officer must rotate through 3 of these different specialized academies. The idea is to break down national silos and build a genuinely Pan-African officer corps with a shared understanding and, hopefully, loyalty. And this next point seems critical, especially given past concerns about military power in Africa, anti-corruption and abuse oversight. The source explicitly states, every mission gets independent review by African civilians, lawyers, human rights defenders,
Okay,
and
independent
peacekeepers.
review by civilians and human rights defenders. That sounds robust on paper. But the crucial question is always enforcement, right? How do they ensure the review has real teeth and isn't just a rubber stamp, especially when powerful military interests are involved?
That's the perennial challenge. The source implies this isn't just an after-the-fact review. Phrasing suggests these civilian and human rights elements might be embedded somehow within the mission oversight structures, providing real-time or near real-time checks. It seems aimed at deterrence, making accountability part of the process, not just a potential consequence later. It's a proactive approach.
A
at
proactive
least in
approach to
theory.
transparency. Interesting.
And related to preventing power grabs, there's the rotational command principle. The blueprint says all major leadership roles rotate every 2 years across regions. This shows they're clearly thinking about the historical risk of military leaders becoming entrenched. It's an institutional
Right, trying to
safeguard
learn
baked
from
right
history.
in. Definitely. And then there's this element which I found particularly fascinating: a border diplomacy and de-escalation force. This isn't primarily a fighting unit. Its focus is negotiation. The source quotes someone named General Umoja saying, "Not every fight needs a bullet. This special unit negotiates peace
A
before
diplomacy
it gets bloody."
force within the army structure. That's unusual.
It is. General Umoja is further quoted, "Africa's future doesn't need more heroes with guns. It needs protectors with vision." It suggests a really different philosophy. Maybe a recognition that so many conflicts have roots that military force alone
So less
can't
about
fix.
projecting force, more about maybe proactive stability building. Diplomacy first, backed by the potential for force if needed, but not leading with it.
Exactly. It signals a potential strategic shift, moving beyond purely
Okay, so
kinetic
if we pull back and
responses.
look at the big picture, all these structures,
Yeah.
these principles, what's the driving force? The source says it's not about starting wars, it's about never being bullied again. What does that mean in context?
Well, think about the history. Foreign military bases on African soil for decades. Conflicts dragging on unresolved. Terror groups destabilizing entire regions, sometimes with, neighbors feeling powerless or hesitant to intervene directly. There's a quote in the source from Mama Panana, described as an AU senior diplomat. She apparently said, "The One Africa government means nothing if we can't protect our people. This army is not to intimidate,
Liberate
it's to
from
liberate."
what, exactly?
Liberate from that feeling of helplessness, perhaps, from external interference dictating security outcomes, from internal threats that cross borders. It speaks to this deep-seated frustration and a rising desire for, well, genuine sovereignty and the ability to handle African problems with African solutions. It's Africa wanting to write its own
And the source
security
claims this
narrative.
army isn't coming to conquer, but to serve. It sounds very positive, almost idealistic. An army that serves.
It does. And the source gives concrete examples of what that service might look like. Responding rapidly to floods like those seen in Mozambique. Coordinating efforts against terror cells, say, in Niger. Acting as a unified, legitimate force to counter unconstitutional
So,
coup
targeted
d'etat.
interventions based on clear continental needs or threats.
That seems to be the vision. It's presented as Africa collectively saying, as the source puts it, we will not let outsiders decide when we bleed or when we heal. It's about proactive response.
Of
and
course, a
mutual
plan this massive, this ambitious, it's not going to be met with universal applause. There must be concerns, questions, who's watching this, and who's getting nervous.
Oh, absolutely. The reactions are apparently coming from both inside and outside the continent. Internally, the source mentions nations like Morocco, Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea expressing concerns. The worries seem to be around, the practicalities. Who ultimately controls the weapons? Will the bigger, more established military powers, Nigeria, Egypt, South Africa, end up
The
dominating
who holds
the
the
whole
master
structure?
key question.
Exactly. There's a leaked note mentioned, attributed to Chairman Shadow, quoting a diplomat. We support unity, but who holds the master key? The source frames this as a fair point, but insists the plan is built on collaboration, not domination. Still, it highlights that core challenge of trust and power sharing across 50-plus diverse
And what about
nations.
globally? How are world powers reacting, according to the source?
The source paints a picture of global powers watching very closely and, feeling nervous. U.S. AFRICOM reportedly held an emergency call right after the story broke. France is said to be reviewing its joint military operations with African nations. China and Turkey, interestingly, are described as offering silent support, but with an expectation of economic access in return. Classic
So it's already
geopolitical
causing
maneuvering.
ripples.
Definitely. The source poses it starkly. What does it mean when, for the first time in history, Africa isn't asking permission, it's drafting orders? It suggests a fundamental shift in power dynamics is potentially underway, challenging the status quo where external actors often set the security agenda in Africa.
Beyond the structures and the global reactions, there's a specific individual mentioned. Someone whose alleged presence at that secret Pretoria meeting adds a really intriguing layer. Captain Ibrahim Traore.
Yes, his name keeps coming up, according to the source. Traore, the leader in Burkina Faso, he was apparently at this roundtable, and they attribute a quote to him. A president without an army is a slogan. A continent without protection is a playground for the world.
Reflects
Very
that no
strong
more bullying
words.
sentiment.
Precisely. And the source notes his significant popularity, particularly among junior military officers across various countries, Mali, Tanzania, South Sudan, Angola. They apparently connect with him because he speaks their language. Action, not speeches. He seems to represent this new wave of, assertive, perhaps even impatient leadership that resonates with those tired of the old ways. This source even mentions whispers of him as a potential first president of a more unified Africa, or at least a continental commander in spirit.
So he's become a symbol for this movement, whether officially or unofficially.
It certainly seems that way. His presence, alleged presence, signifies a certain energy
And tying back to the
direction.
structure, the source really hammers home this point. The future battlefield is no longer land, it's code. How does the blueprint translate that into practical capabilities?
Well, as we touched on with the Cyber and Space Division, it's about deep integration of technology. The plan apparently envisions using drones developed and built by African engineers, implementing AI-powered systems for border security. There are even plans mentioned for satellite launches based in Algeria, Ethiopia, and Ghana, and these coordinated cyber defense teams operating out of hubs like Lagos, Nairobi,
So a serious
and Tunis.
investment in indigenous tech and digital defense, not just buying off-the-shelf solutions from elsewhere.
That seems to be the emphasis, building continental capacity in these critical future
But
domains.
let's circle back to that crucial concern. Military power, potentially leading to authoritarianism. It's a fear grounded in history across the continent. Africans have seen military leaders take power and then will never leave. How does this blueprint tackle that specific risk head on?
Yeah, it's probably the biggest internal hurdle, right? Building trust that this new power structure won't become oppressive. The source stresses that the blueprint has specific safeguards built in. We mentioned the rotational command and term limits for generals, but also the embedding of civilians in mission oversight, and these review audits by a continental ethics board. The stated goal, very explicitly, according to the source, is not building another dictatorship.
Discipline,
We're building
not dictatorship.
discipline. Exactly. It shows a clear awareness of the danger and, at least on paper, a structured attempt to prevent it. They seem to be trying to create institutional checks and balances
Now,
from the outset.
the source does something interesting towards the end. It speaks directly to the listener, to, the ordinary African watching this unfold. It says, you are not just a citizen. You are part of something bigger. What's the deeper message there?
I think it's about connecting this high-level strategic plan to the everyday lives and aspirations of people across the continent. This isn't just about generals and geopolitics, the source argues. This envisioned army, it means potential jobs in logistics, engineering, tech support for, your cousins or neighbors. It means contracts, potentially going to African tech companies, boosting local economies. On a more fundamental level, it means the promise of protection when disaster strikes, like floods or storms. It offers hope when conflict flares up nearby, that there's a capable force ready to respond.
Maybe. Respect.
Yeah, exactly. And perhaps most importantly, the source suggests, it means earning respect on the world stage. It quotes General Umoja again. Africa's army is not coming to intimidate. It's coming to inspire, to shield farmers, to protect mothers, to give children a future. So it's linking this military project directly to human security, dignity, and the future prospects of ordinary people. A profound shift in self-perception and maybe, just maybe,
So wrapping up
global
this
standing.
deep dive, the source really paints a picture of an incredibly ambitious, almost revolutionary vision. And it ends with this powerful declaration.
Yeah, Tisu Vanhuvacho and now Tisu Magosha, which apparently translates to something like, we are the people and now we are the power. It frames this whole alleged movement as the culmination of a long struggle. After centuries of being, as the source puts it, exploited, divided, ridiculed, dismissed, the dream now is for Africa to finally be respected,
We
to
are
have
the power.
agency.
It's a potent message.
It really is. And this whole alleged blueprint, with all its intricate details, its built-in safeguards, it leaves us with a huge question, doesn't it? If this vision, or even something like it, actually becomes reality, what new possibilities does that open up for African security, for African sovereignty? And maybe just as importantly, how does that fundamentally redefine the continent's relationship with
Lots
the
to
rest
think
of the world?
about. As you've been listening to this, what's the one thing that really stands out to you about this alleged move towards a united African defense? Something to ponder.